Over the past few years, many of us car people have started to complain that modern sporty cars have gone to these eco-turbocharged four-bangers that give you instant gratification but then leave you limp afterwards. Then we get to a vehicle like the Durango SRT, which is about V8 excitement, brawn, balls, hauling crap. So is it any good? Let's take a look. When I first saw the front half of the Durango SRT, I looked at it and immediately I thought, this is aggressive. It looks solid, rigid. There's this sense of just presence to it. And that's exactly what the SRT people want with these vehicles. You know, you look at the Challenger, Hellcat, the Jeep, they look mean. The other thing is this grille. This is kind of what sets it off for me. There's so many sporty cars that I see now that I could literally take a toothpick and break the grills. They are so cheap. This thing, I could take a ball peen hammer to it and it probably wouldn't break. It has an inlet in the front for cooling. It has heat extractors on the hood, an inlet on the hood to cool it off, and this thing runs extremely hot. This is absolutely needed, namely if you're pounding it around. But the whole front of the car has kind of been lifted from the Charger, and the SRT guys say that there's some Viper in this. I don't see it, but whatever, that is what it is. Let's take a look at the side. When you walk along the side of this vehicle, aside from its size, I look tiny next to it, of course, like a lot of modern vehicles. You can't really tell this too much apart from the standard Durango, except for the 392 badging, the forged aluminum wheels, and of course these massive Brembo brakes. The other thing that I really like about this, in the sun specifically, is how much metallic fleck is in the paint. It looks really cool, but then again, when the sun starts to fade, it looks boring like every other like dark silver car, but it gives it that sleeper aspect if that's something you're looking for. Let's take a look at the rump. Now, this is where you're going to be spending most of your time. And lucky enough, this Durango has electronic liftgate, which for me is an exercise in patience due to its speed. But once it finally opens up, you'll realize, just like every other three-row crossover, there is a compromise in space here once that third row is up. And, you know, most people get used to that. I don't mind the back space. There is an indentation or a cutout on the left-hand side here on the driver's side rear to get a little bit more extra room, which is welcome. But overall, the way you put these seats up and down is extremely easy. I found great pleasure in lowering and raising these. First, you grab this plastic handle, pull it, the headrest folds down on its own, or you can lower it in the touchscreen. Pull the handle, boom. Same thing with the other side. Assuming you're not loaded with cargo, you can see my bag is already obscuring the handle. That's as simple as it is. Now pulling it up, you gotta reach in and grab the straps. There's no electronics, which is a pro and a con because you do have to lean forward a little bit. But these straps are secured with Velcro that is lower quality than my Velcro shoes from Walmart. It would be nice to have some type of magnetics, which you see on other cars. Now getting in the back seats is a real pleasure, real pleasure. You sit in here, you're comfortable, assuming the front passenger isn't totally jacking into your knees. You can recline quite easily, but the best part is getting into the back seats, which is usually a total pain in the ass on third rows. You pull the handle, folds down, you kind of dick with this strap. This thing flips forward. You crawl in here, easy. One of my favorite parts about this thing. Now getting out is just as easy. That's all there is to it. Now when my lady friend Regina found out I had the SRT Durango, she had questions for me. Now, she's with child for about the 15th time now, and her boyfriend Jerome, her current boyfriend, they want to know, can we fit a plethora of children or adults back here? And I said, well, let me tell you, I've had so much personal enjoyment back here with the entertainment system. Both rear passengers get a digital display, an LCD screen, and each seat is equipped with HDMI inputs and composite video input. So you can plug your VCR in, your beta cam, your laptop, your DVD player, your Blu-ray player, and there is a disk drive in the armrest in the front to watch movies. And you can also remotely connect it to the front screen, and the display quality is pretty horrendous up front, but in the back, you know, you're going to enjoy yourself like I did. Now, getting in the front of the Durango SRT, it's like the other SRT products. They've chosen extremely wide, extremely comfortable seats. Now, granted, these feel a little bit firm to me, but the car's almost brand new, so they need to be broken in with some real weight, not the weight I'm carrying. But this has the demonic red leather. What does that mean? It's just red leather with a fancy name. They are comfortable. It's got the SRT logo stitched into them. And I think that's one of the biggest things about this vehicle, getting serious for a moment, is its level of comfort. I got out of the Charger Hellcat and I thought, this seems absolutely wrong at how comfortable it is, and it carries over into the Durango. Now, Chrysler and Dodge have not been known for their interior quality for a long time, and they're definitely trying to improve it here. So the first thing you notice is this upper dashboard material is like this stitched leather, and it looks legit. It doesn't look cheesy at all. They have this kind of silver white cross stitching. They said they have this suede black headliner in here, which feels more like microfiber to me, but you know, check it out. It is nice. It elevates the quality of the interior mostly. The other pieces, they have kind of like this silver grid plastic that breaks up all the blacks. The upper door panels are a soft plastic material. The armrests on the door and on the center armrest are a soft leather. It feels great. They save all the hard plastics for where you don't see. Knee line, near your feet, and most of it works. And then you get to the plastichrome. It's all over. The door handles, the center instrument cluster, the vents, the center stack, the cup holders. It is horrendous. And you ask, what's the big deal? Well, not only does it blind you in the sunlight, but it looks like somebody working at Chrysler for 50 years had a goal set to get rid of all their backlog of plastichrome dipped pieces. It's just straight up AutoZone discount bin looking in here, and it drops the quality of this space by like at least 100%. Now let's talk about ergonomics. On the steering wheel, you have paddle shifters, left and right. They feel real solid, but this carries over the traditional Chrysler volume knobs underneath and the track selector knob. So the shifters, the paddles don't go all the way down. So it takes some getting used to that you only can use them at the top. The steering wheel is electronic. It has an electric motor that telescopes, goes up and down, and I think most people are gonna fit in this car with zero issue. It's really good at how much room you have in here. The next part is the knobs and switches on the center stack. There's nothing here that's gonna freak you out, that you don't know what it does. You have rotary knobs for volume and tuning. You have a rotary knob for your fan speed. You have up and down arrows for heat and climate. Pretty much all your HVAC controls are right here and easy to get to. Now the big fail is not everything's physical. You don't have physical controls for your seat heaters and seat coolers. How do you get to it? The touch screen. And I gotta tell you, it's one of the biggest turnoffs of this car. Now the Uconnect system in here, the graphical user interface, the way that you interact with it is one of the better ones out of most cars today, especially when you're in park. The way that the menu structure works, the way that you get around is really good. And namely from the performance perspective, the SRT mode, where you can choose your different drive modes from towing to sport to auto to track. The way you configure all that, including launch control, is about one of the best implementations you're going to find out there. Now, why is that an issue? Well, because it's so difficult to navigate this thing while you're driving. It's designed for sitting there and having to have 100% focus on here. So when I want to go turn off the seat heater, I got to fumble around these menus. And it's one of the biggest problems with modern cars. And I talk about this all the time. Yes, it's usable. Yes, a lot of it works pretty well, but it's still laggy. It's still slow. And you still have to use the touchscreen for too many core functions of the vehicle. So, you know, if you can get used to that, you're probably going to like this. Oh, and they have a one-touch screen off, which is great. But there is some backlight bleed from the LCD panel. Now, the last thing to talk about before we get to the instrumentation cluster is something that Yuri and Jacob from the StraightPipes always fiddle each other over.
3, 2, 1.
Now in the SRT Durango, it has a neat feature. When you move it forward and back, there's a shotgun cocking sound that the car does. The instrument cluster. The center portion of this gauge setup is an LCD screen. The left and the right part are analog gauges, and they're not even really analog anymore. When I've had people in this car, the first thing they ask is, how the hell do I get the speedometer right in the center? And all of that is done through the left, right, up and down, and the OK button on the left side of the steering wheel. Now, there is so much information piled in here. You can go through all your gauges, your performance modes, your 0 to 60 time, your lap timers, your horsepower gauges, your oil temperature, all of that is here. And one of the things I use a lot is an oil temperature gauge. I put it right front and center so I know when the car's up to temperature or when I need to back off. But oftentimes on the highway, I just want to know how fast I'm going. And that's the thing. They've jammed so much in here that getting back and forth between the menus is as intuitive as it is. It's so slow. You got to click and wait, click and wait. And I find so much that it's a distraction to get around. There's so much delay in getting where you want to go. And that's what I'm talking about with infotainment and electronics in cars. They haven't integrated it well enough yet to get it to be so you don't think about it, and you have to think about it here, which is the worst part. Let's end this on a high note, because this is something that's back and it should have never gone away, much like all these modern cars with ZF transmissions where it's a digi-stick. Let's turn this on. The Durango, now probably for legal reasons, has gone back to a gated shifter. Look at that. Now it clicks into gears. Every gear, you know exactly what it is because you feel it. And that is a huge pro to this Durango that I haven't seen on a lot of the cars that are switching away from it. Now that you know more than you want, let's head to the shop and look at the underbody of this Durango. Woo-wee.
You've been practicing that all morning?
Every time.
Every time we do launch control?
Yep. SRT Durango.
Yeah, street race and track, bro.
That street racing technology.
Oh.
Now that we're under here, Scott, people are going to want to know that the only time you come to visit is when it's an American pile.
When it's a high-performance vehicle.
No, this is... As soon as I told you MOPAR was in the garage, I can't believe how fast you came over.
I was sleeping outside. I was waiting for you to get here.
So what do we got?
Durango SRT.
What's so special about it?
It's got a Hemi, a launch control.
It's got a big-ass Hemi. 6.4 liters.
6.4?
Yeah.
I thought it was 6.2.
It's a 6.4. Most of the MOPAR guys don't talk about displacement. They talk about cubic inches, which is what you're always talking about.
392 cubic inches.
And they even stamp it on the side so there's no confusion. So, yeah, the Europeans, they don't like that. Now, in the front, there are some changes. There's minor increases to spring rates. I think like 4%, something like that. They do have... There are tweaks to the chassis. This is very similar to the regular Durango, except, you know, you shoehorn this massive motor in here. You have the Torque Flight 8-speed automatic transmission.
They call it a Torque Flight again?
It's Torque Flight, yeah. So it really is pretty proven. If you're not going to modify this, I don't anticipate you're going to have too many problems, especially for what type, you know, of 3-row crossover. I don't see people going out and racing this.
I'd send it right to Hennessy.
No, for what? The 1,000 horsepower?
1,000 horsepower upgrade.
That's ridiculous. I don't know how people can deal with that. I'd just be doing it every time I went to a stoplight. The brakes, Scott, let's talk about that. The rotors, 15 inches. Now it's a one-piece. There's not a two-piece design here, but they've added some slots near the trailing edge of the rotor face. So that's going to give you a little bit of pleasure for outgassing, which you like. And what about them calipers?
They're gigantic 6 pistons.
Yeah, they are. And they're bigger than probably most people's wheels. They are just tremendous. The only other thing to talk about in the front is we have Bilstein dampers, and they are adjustable dampers, and they can auto-adjust themselves, and then there's 3 modes that you can choose, pretty much soft, medium, and hard, based on your track or your sport or your street setting.
That's funny they put track.
I know, it's funny to me. And then the next thing is they've absolutely maximized the widest wheel and tire combo they could possibly do for a factory car. If you notice that the upper A-arm, or it's not the upper A-arm, it's the upright, is almost touching that wheel. There's about a finger space in there. So don't be trying to add any wider tires in here. You're just going to rub.
Oh, wheel spacers.
Yeah, I guess you could do some wheel spacers. What, 50 millimeters?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good idea.
To get the bolt-on ones off the Jeep Wranglers.
Yeah, oof. You have double wishbone suspension in the front, aluminum lower A-arm, hubs, uprights, although your upper A-arm is still
I know, you look at the
steel.
lower one, it's like, man, that thing's amazing. You look up, it's like, really? Where'd they pull that off of a Neon?
Yeah, probably the Espresso.
We're under your favorite part, the back end.
You just like the Scorpion Verdes.
Well, speaking of tires, this says run flat on it, correct?
Correct.
Why in the hell does it have a spare tire then?
Just in case you're in the middle of nowhere and you run out of the capacity.
The run flatness?
Yeah, the run flatness.
I mean, why even bother putting run flats on it?
And the optional tires, because it has optional wheels and tires, which are also forged, they're both run flat options. So there's like a more summer, there's more of a summer, a 2-season Scorpion, and then an all-season, which this has on there. And I don't get it either.
Well, I mean, not that I pay attention to cars that run flats, but I don't think I've ever noticed one with a real spare tire on it. What the hell's the point? They could have done an array of exhaust spouts across the back so that way you can't tow with it.
Let's talk about that. You know how much this can tow? Almost 8,700 pounds. So this is a legitimate, it's not like when they first started doing these like high performance Nerf SUVs, they couldn't tow. This, you can go beat the shit out of it, have fun, and then still use it as a regular vehicle. Like,
And it's got a hitch on it already, right?
yeah, it does.
It's hidden under the cover.
Yep, you got to take the cover off. Now, in terms of suspension changes, the spring rates are 16% stiffer in the rear, and the sway bar is 18% stiffer in the rear, as you know.
You
compared
didn't
to
talk
the
about how much stiffer the front sway bar is.
The front sway bar is not any stiffer.
Really?
Only the spring rates are up by 3% in the front. So they didn't really make a ton of tweaks. The biggest tweak is the active, the active suspension with these Bilsteins, and it can change the valving on the fly, as we talked about in the front. Now, there is no limited slip differential in the center diff or in the rear diff, but it's, electronically controlled like most cars are doing these days. So I don't think, personally, from driving the snot out of this, there is any problems with traction. Like, absolutely no problems with traction. So there are so many different driving modes. I'm not going to cover all of them, but the main highlight is this can go to a maximum of 70-30 split. 70 to the rear in track mode, 60 for towing mode to the rear, and then a 50-50 split for snow and that environment. And when you put it in auto, it can vary it itself. But I think the most dynamic driving mode, the best driving mode, is track because it feels most rear-wheel drive. So that's just something to talk about. But for the most part, the only other thing they've done here is, like you said, they look real nice.
They look like it came straight out of the AutoZone showroom.
It does. They don't look very high quality, but what do I know? They are 2.75 inches, Scott. How do you feel about that?
Sounds pretty good.
They sound really good. This does not lack a true V8 exhaust.
Well, this is like the right amount of sound that's not going to drive you nuts.
Yes. Yep. This is just a slight V8 rumble. I wouldn't change this unless it rots out, honestly, which in the Midwest, you can guarantee that's going to happen. You know what I said at the beginning of this video?
You love it.
No, I didn't say I loved it, but we constantly complain how every car is going to 4-poppers. And whatever you think about FCA or Dodge from the past to the present, somebody's still doing V8s in something that shouldn't have this, and it's amazing. And this has cylinder deactivation, which I'm going to talk about in the driving segment. And what's your experience with cylinder deactivation with some other brands?
It's great. It's a great feature to have.
Yeah, why?
Because it's more money for us when it breaks.
That's right. And that's what scares me about this. Not saying that it's going to break, but you have the option to be able to disable it based on your driving mode. So if you go into sport or track, no more cylinder deactivation. which will then get you the ability to have a premium 9.3 miles per gallon. So I understand why they put it on here. But the other stuff is this makes 475 horsepower and 470 pounds of torques. That's a lot.
It's pretty good.
And what's the NHRA numbers?
I don't know.
It's like 12.9 seconds,
that's
quarter
crazy.
mile.
Take the spare tire off that's not needed, you might get 12.89.
Right, yeah. And it has a 0 to 60 timer in the car, and it's certified at 4.4 seconds. And all the runs I did back to back to back were all about 4.5 to 4.6, depending on how you launch it. And this car does run hot. Truck, whatever you want to call it.
Vehicle.
The vehicle runs hot. I don't know that they addressed cooling in here, probably because people aren't going to push it that hard. But on street driving, I mean, I was always getting this up in the high 270s in terms of oil temperature. And the pressures didn't drop, which is good. But it's something that I think if you're going to drive this hard, you'd want to watch or keep an eye on. And what did you say the oil grade was?
0W40.
Thank God somebody's finally doing zero weight or zero winter oil with a 40 weight. I mean, with how good these oils have gotten, you could probably even run a 050, if you're worried more about heat. But anyway, this makes more than adequate power for how big and how heavy this is. I think that's what you were saying. You're pretty surprised by that.
It's amazing. It's ridiculous.
Let's get right into it. The real world of driving a vehicle like this. The SRT Durango is extremely comfortable. This was designed to be more of a family hauler turned sports truck. But here's kind of the gist of it. When you're putting around, you want to put around basically in eco mode or just automatic mode, where the cylinder deactivation kicks in all the time, because that's the only way you're going to get 15 miles to the gallon. Now, the thing is, with cylinder deactivation, there's plenty of manufacturers that have problems with it. And for me, if I owned it, I'd almost always keep it in sport or track mode to avoid the switchover. Because when I'm driving and I can constantly feel the 4-cylinder mode kicking in, it creates NVH, it creates a vibration. It reminds me of driving a car that has lean burn capability, that switches in and out of lean burn. You feel a hesitation, and as soon as you get on the throttle, it's constantly on and off. I mean, there's no perfect solution except to leave it in kind of that track or performance mode where you don't have that. But the trade-off is I barely got 11 miles to the gallon. And that's kind of the point of this. You have the capability to make this a real-world car. And I said this about the Toyota Land Cruiser. It's a great, comfortable vehicle, much like this is, but with that, I could not stand getting 13 miles to the gallon. At least with the Durango SRT, you can have a little bit of fun. So that's the big point. If you're really looking for this, it's a serious consideration. Now, when you get this thing going, you want to talk about how it rides. And this vehicle has adaptive dampers. And when you set up adaptive dampers properly, it means you should be able to drive along every day and not get beat up. But when you want to go hardcore, when you want to get in the turns, you can flip it over to something a lot more aggressive. And that's what this allows you to do. Now, on bad pavement like this, of course, there's a lot of turns, but like many manufacturers say, where there's great driving roads, the pavement isn't kept up, and that's the case. And I feel like even when I'm in the track mode or custom mode, I almost always leave the suspension in street because it feels the best on daily driving. If you switch it over to track mode, I mean, it is almost intolerable on bad pavement. But again, they allow you the flexibility to kind of go from soft, medium to hard, which is good. Now, when you're just driving around, power is never an issue with this. It's unbelievable how quick it is. The SRT guys claim that this is a track-friendly machine. Let's take it through some of the turns. The transmission is so good in here. Now, here's the thing. And I talked about this a little bit with all the gauges. It's nice to have all this information. And then you realize right off the bat that I get the oil temperature up so high on this car just from street driving. The other day when I was doing some of my testing, I had it all the way up to 276 degrees, which is crazy. Now, I didn't see oil temperatures drop, but it's one of those things that you probably, should keep an eye on. I don't think anybody's really gonna track this car. Now we're gonna check out what it's like to accelerate with this vehicle in a straight line. This has launch control. You hit launch, you should be in track mode. You hold your foot to the floor, rev it up based on your set RPM, which I have it at 3,000 RPMs. Hit the gas. Now I left it in automatic mode, and I think the transmission does an amazing job even in auto mode, and I think that's something, they have the paddles and they do work. It holds revs, it allows you to upshift and downshift quickly, but I think most people aren't going to use them, and there's really not a big penalty to letting the car just shift for you. It can sense G-force. It's quick to respond when you push down the throttle. It downshifts instantly. I'm coming into this turn. It's in the right gear for the most part. It will hold the gear that you need to be in. This is one of the best parts about the SRT Durango is the trans. But when you take control of the transmission manually, that's when this thing becomes more of a sports car. It's so much fun. Brakes are tremendous, and I think what you're going to notice when you pound this around, I would never take it to a track. It understeers safely, and then even in track mode, it will only send 70% of the power to the rear, but it's constantly adjusting the power for you, and I think this is a really, really safe, fun, hardcore, family hauler. I don't think I've been in anything like this besides the Jeep SRT that gives you so much satisfaction driving it. I mean, you can really pound the shit out of this thing every day. Yes, you're gonna pay a high price in fuel economy, but it's so much fun. And with the launch control, the way that you can take off, I could just imagine having kids in the back and just doing it at every light just as an entertainment value thing. And I think that's something to be said about this. You might say, well, what's the point? And really, what is the point? The point is that you have a company that's willing to kind of take the risks of doing this and make an entertaining vehicle that most people could drive. Now, yes, it is expensive, but if you have the money, you don't want to settle for some ho-hum SUV or a minivan, this thing's gonna give you so many smiles. Final thoughts on the Durango SRT. If you strip off all the add-ons, you can save almost $10,000 off the way this car was configured. Dump the sunroof, the technology package, the rear DVD entertainment package that I was fiddling with. At 65 grand, that's still a lot of money for a family. And you might be wondering, why would you get this? Who can afford it? Well, it's for somebody that, might have a family who can't afford to have a second or a third car. We can't all drive around Corvettes or Hellcats or Mark Cross LeBarons. It's just not possible. So this gives you kind of the fun of a sporty experience, the entertainment value, while being able to tow and, pile in 3 or 4 kids or then some. So that's the big pro of this. The negative part is you know, it's on an older platform. You know, this architecture is back from the Daimler Chrysler days, so it still works well. You can tell in terms of when we put this on the scales, you can see the cross balance is amazingly good. The front to rear split's almost 50-50. So there's a lot of, even though despite it being older, it works pretty well. The interior space is pretty good. Yeah, there's some cheesiness in here, but overall, from a performance perspective, the trans is good. The motor's pretty tried and true. You just have to wait and see if all the electronics and all the nannies are going to hold up to the test of time. But at this price point, you know, it's a good alternative, and it's nice to see a big V8 in a car like, or a truck like this, that they still exist. And I know that's not going to last forever, and this might be the time to do it if you can deal with the fuel economy penalty. Take that for what it's worth. I'll see you next time.